What would have happened if Tanjiro was actually trained by Giyu instead of Urokodaki? We know that the Hashira, the water Hashira, decides to actually pass on Tanjiro to Urokodaki, more or less either thinking that he's a better match to train him, or maybe Giyu flat out just feels that he isn't ready to take on this responsibility. So what would have happened if Giyu actually ended up training Tanjiro instead of Urokodaki himself? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Now, first off, before I even begin to get into the deep dive of this idea, I want to talk about, well, for one, I hope y'all enjoy the video. For two, check out the links in the description. I have a Discord, so check that out if you want to come hang out, talk. I'm trying to make it more active, so I'll be responding at least a little bit more on the Discord. On top of that, check out the anime clothing brand that I'm actually partnered with, and this is more of a anime inspired clothing. Talk about JJK stuff, maybe other type of anime based clothing, or just maybe cool anime quotes that you can check out on that store. Nothing directly connected to the anime, so if you want something that is more casual and something that you can probably wear around and not get weird looks from, then you'll probably enjoy this type of clothing. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. I really enjoy it, and that's all I really gotta conclude with in terms of the intro. But now, with all that said, let's get into what if Tanjiro was trained by Giyu instead of Urokodaki. Now, I want to start from the very beginning. We know that Tanjiro's family would be killed just like normal, but they would also lead to Tanjiro obviously clashing with, well, the one and only Hashira, or the one and only water Hashira by the name of Giyu. Now, Tomioka is a bit of a basket case, and that's basically to say the least. We know that in the normal canon, he's just not mentally okay, just because he believes he doesn't deserve to be the water Hashira, and that's no spoilers, that's just flat out what he believes at this point. Now, what would have happened if he actually decided that he should take it upon himself to actually train Tanjiro? For starters, I think there's one path, at least for this first part, and that would be Nezuko herself actually not being with Tanjiro. Now, you may be wondering why. Well, the first off is if they do go and train with her or with Giyu Tomioka, we know that, well, they're not going to take it lightly that Nezuko is a demon, so they need more time to actually sway that idea of Nezuko being a good demon later in the future. So they send Nezuko to Urokodaki, or at least bring her there initially, and Giyu explains the whole situation, and Urokodaki begins to more or less kind of try to put Nezuko in a sort of trance, just like normal. Now, from here on out, Tanjiro would go with Giyu and spend a very similar amount of time training, just like he did with Urokodaki. Now, would this training be more or less beneficial? Well, there's a couple ways you could look at it, but all of the ways will end up being more beneficial for Tanjiro. Now, I only say this because he's going to have more people surrounding him, being that of the other Hashiras, and more qualified people, or possibly qualified people, that can actually help him in this regard. Now, with all that said, Tanjiro would be in training with Giyu himself, but one pathway would be that Giyu finds this to be his way of redemption. That he finds that training Tanjiro to his utmost ability, so actually trying his absolute hardest to make sure Tanjiro becomes the best demon slayer possible, could be of great importance for Tanjiro. He would learn different techniques that he would never have known in the very beginning, and also be far more prepared. I mean, at the same time, yes, Giyu probably is less of a teacher than Urokodaki, but all of that is kind of piled up and ends up being a more of a positive, because he has people to train with. People like Kanao, and people like the other Hashira, like Shinobu, or anybody else you can possibly think of. And at the end of the day, Tanjiro would grow immensely in strength, and he would learn concentration breathing constant far sooner, and we know how strong that truly is in this regard. Now, I wouldn't say he's as strong as Kanao. I think Kanao is extremely strong, but this allows him to at least be even stronger than he was normally in canon. Now, you may be wondering, well, what's the other version of this that I'm thinking of? Well, the other version is that Giyu tries to help him, and really does, and wants to more or less help Tanjiro to his best of his ability, but he really can't. And you may be wondering why. Well, there's a mental roadblock in Giyu Tomioka's brain, and that kind of affects him majorly in the training aspect of helping, well, Tanjiro. But luckily enough, with multiple, and when I mean multiple, I mean multiple people all around, it actually doesn't become that big of an issue. Giyu would eventually get over his more or less trauma to the idea that he's going to more or less throw Tanjiro into the heat of the battle, because he now understands that, hey, this is something he needs to do, Tanjiro needs to do, because his sister is now on the line. Would he allow Tanjiro to just allow his sister to die? No, of course not. So Tanjiro will be ready, and he'll make sure that he is ready. So that's why I say both pathways still end with Tanjiro being stronger than the normal canon, and his abilities in terms of fighting is far more sharp, because he's actually able to fight with many crazy good swordsmen and actually replicate or at least learn from a lot of their styles, something that Tanjiro would eventually do later on anyways, at least to a certain extent. Now, you may be wondering, how much of this would actually change the future of Demon Slayer? Well, for starters, the final selection would be even easier than normal. Yes, that is a very obvious idea, because Tanjiro would be stronger right now, and his ability to use water breathing is far more sharp, and on top of that, his concentration breathing constant is something that is absolutely lethal at this stage of the playing field in terms of Demon Slayer. Now, for a lot of these different arcs that we have, being that the kidnapper arc, that is a very easy arc for Tanjiro, but let's talk about what happens directly after the final selection. So obviously Tanjiro would travel back to the Hashira mansion, or more or less the Butterfly Mansion. And he would go there and then kind of be told by Giyu that he needs to go and see his sister once again. This would kind of make things a little out of order in terms of travel, but Tanjiro would eventually head to Urokodaki. Excuse me for saying that twice, but would head to Urokodaki, and Tanjiro would get his sister. Now, this would be a Nezuko that is obviously fully basically hypnotized into thinking that every human is family, just like normal, and Tanjiro would be more powerful, so a fight with the Swamp Demon right after this would be absolutely nothing. And the same thing with Muzan, or fighting the people that are basically sent out to hunt him by Muzan. A very easy replica of fights, just because of how much further along Tanjiro is. And as he continues to grow in strength, and as he continues to get more and more battle experience against demons, it's only benefiting him even more, because the connection he already had to Giyu now is actually helping him drastically in terms of his fight style and actually his swordsmanship in general. I mean, when you're surrounded by people that are extremely talented in terms of swordsmanship, it is obvious that he would grow much greater than if he had, well, Urokodaki, and then obviously Makomo and Sabito, which they didn't really show that much of their swordsmanship besides Sabito, but that's obviously limited because Sabito was, well, dead at a young age, so his actual ability as a swordsman would be far more limited than most Hashira that are actually available for training. Now, with that said, let's lead into him actually meeting Zenitsu. Now, this whole confrontation would be very similar, if not exactly the same, and after he obviously knows that he has to get blood from these 12 Kizuki, he would make it a point to eliminate Kyogai as quickly as possible, or the Drum Demon. He was part of the 12 Kizuki at one point, so he needs to make sure that this is quickly and swiftly dealt with as soon as possible. I mean, at the end of the day, he was taught by Giyu. This is someone that is a no-nonsense, to-the-point type of person, and he knows that, well, he needs to get things done as quickly as possible. And frankly, a lot of the Hashira are like that as well, are no-nonsense people. Even though Rengoku, someone like him, is super nice and cheerful, he is, to an extent, a large extent, is a no-nonsense person, even though he is on the nicer side. The only person that isn't necessarily no nonsense would be someone like Mitsuri, but still, even to her own extent, is that way as well. And every Hashira does invoke that into someone's brain. And you might be wondering, oh, well, I mean, no duh, like Urokodaki did the same thing to him before as well. But it's different when you have 8, 9, 12, tons of people of the same mindset being around basically one person. Think of it like this. When you're in a room and you're the smartest in the room, you will gain nothing. But if you are the dumbest in the room and others are smarter than you in that room and you're surrounded by a bunch of people smarter than you, you can only get smarter. That's the same concept with the swordsmanship and also the mindset of a demon slayer. And Tanjiro could take this into battle with his more equipped skills, and this would allow him to eliminate the demons far easier than in normal. Now, with that said, the defeat of Kyogai and all the other demons are inevitable, and Zenitsu and Inosuke would eventually kind of become part of the group. But everything else in Mount Natagomo, or the next arc after that with Rui, would be literally exactly the same. You might be wondering why. Well, that's because, well, he can't beat Rui. You might be thinking, oh, well, I mean, he almost beat him last time. Well, not quite. Rui actually is far more equipped than Tanjiro would be at this point, and even if he would awaken the Hinokimi Kagura, it would be not quite enough. I mean, Rui at the end of the day was able to react quite a bit, and you might be able to argue, hey, well, he has concentration breathing constant, why wouldn't he be able to beat him? But his body is also not at the same level it would have been when he originally actually got concentration breathing constant. And that is a big difference because his body just wouldn't be at that level. There's an argument that his body itself might be slightly weaker because of all the stuff that Urokodaki initially would have put him through entirely. Of course, the Hashira would have had a totally different way of training, and his body wouldn't have been the main focus. It would have been more technique based. Now, that makes him stronger, don't get me wrong, in terms of, well, just raw technique and action and breathing style and stuff like that. But that's all swordsmanship. In terms of raw strength and just more or less ability, stamina, and stuff like that, he would be slightly less, kind of evening the playing field against Rui. Just Rui specifically, because Rui was already stronger than him in the first place, being able to cut off his own neck so Tanjiro couldn't do it for him. Now, Rui would be surprised, of course, by Nezuko and Tanjiro awakening his sun breathing, or basically the first aspect of his sun breathing, and he would go for the shot at the neck. And this would seemingly work, but obviously would be kind of translated that Rui would not be dead. Now, with that said, Giyu would still show up, kill him, and all things would be all the same. I mean, nothing would change in that regard, right? Rui would still more or less die. But on top of that, the communication about Nezuko would be a little bit different because, well, they already know who Tanjiro is, and more or less they learned about Nezuko a little bit sooner, so they're able to basically talk and comprehend it a little bit more, you could say. So the conversation with the Hashira is a little bit easier. It's not as bad, but you know, Nezuko would probably still get stabbed by Saname, and he probably still would take the meanest headbutt of all centuries, but still, you know, it would still most likely work out to be more or less better. Now, here's where things go perfectly and go a little bit better. I talked about how his body probably wouldn't be at the same level as it would have been at this point in the story, at least in the canonical version. But this time around, when he's actually training intensely over everything, like this is a new level of training now. Yes, he might have learned concentration breathing earlier, but this is a different level of training. They've amped it up for him because now his body would be ready for it. This training would accelerate him to that next level, right? And then on top of that, he's going to easily be able to train rigorously with the other Hashira, or basically Kanao, who is a pretty high level demon slayer and way up there in terms of everybody else. Now, let's talk about the fight with Enmu. We know that this Enmu fight, in my opinion at least, would not go any different. The Enmu fight would be very easy, And it would really be the argument of how would the Akaza fight go? Do you think training with the Hashira and also the other demon slayers there, being that Tanjiro did train with them far earlier on, and on top of that, being able to train with Giyu instead of Urokodaki, and just the situation itself, because that's the main difference, is the situation itself, would that benefit them enough to defeat Akaza? Now, I hate to say this, no, I don't think it would. I don't think it would be even close, and I don't think, at the end of the day, if you added another person to fight Akaza, Akaza would have just took it far more seriously, and Akaza probably would have put, well, Rengoku down and seriously hurt Tanjiro, if not killed Tanjiro. Now, I won't say that I believe he would kill Tanjiro in this regard, because I think he would enjoy the fight with Rengoku so much, and Rengoku would more or less tell Tanjiro to stay out of the fight entirely because he's not ready yet, and it still would lead to Rengoku's death. Now, from here on out, we know that there is a little bit of time in between, more or less the recruitment into the Entertainment District arc, but there is no jokes about how Tanjiro's progression would just be 3 steps ahead of his normal progression, so it would just lead to him more or less being multiple steps ahead in every single arc. So I hate to say that I would be wasting time by talking about every single arc from here on out, but that's kind of the truth. Giyu may not be the most capable trainer, but if you had Giyu actually train him in regards at the Hashira Mansion, or at least mildly train him and then give him off to the other Hashira here and there, or give him off to other people that can help train him, shoot, even sparring with Kanao would level him up even further beyond what he normally would be. It would put him multiple steps ahead, and he would continuously be multiple steps ahead of his normal canonical self, and this would allow for every single fight to be a lot easier. Now, I say this in terms of his normal fights, like his one-on-one fights, or, you know, the fights that he's predominantly the main character in, like when he takes on Daki normally just one-on-one. That fight would be a lot easier for him. That would be no joke. Now, with him, or Tengen, and Tanjiro versus Gyutaro, you could say that that fight is far easier, but there is no joke about how strong Gyutaro really was. And Gyutaro could still put Tengen at a point where he literally has no excuse but to retire because of his injuries. Now, I do know that he already made the promise to more or less, you know, retire after he killed an upper moon or something like that of that vicinity to his wives. So he would most likely end up retiring anyways, but he still wouldn't be in battle shape even if they really needed him. Now, the rest of the arcs, like I said, would just rely on Tanjiro being multiple steps ahead. Swordsmith's Village arc, he would be multiple steps ahead of the Tanjiro canonically in this version, and him being able to actually train with Yorichi Type 0 and then eventually fight Hontengu would be a lot easier. Now, this wouldn't make it perfect in terms of the battling. No, of course not. I mean, Tanjiro is no immortal demon god freaking hybrid. Like, he's not insanely strong, and he's not on the same level as someone like, you know, like some of these Hashira, at least not quite yet, but honestly, he'd be pretty damn close at this point. Going into the end of the Swordsmith's Village arc and after the training and all of that, he would be pretty darn close. And then after the Hashira training arc, you could argue that he is, if not far above, Hashira level. I mean, he would easily be able to qualify as a Hashira, and, well, normally in canon, he was probably already at that level too, but I just mean it in terms of he's most likely even stronger than what he was in canon because of just his situation. Situation is everything. I truly believe that in Demon Slayer, outside of the fact of being just straight up born a prodigy. But if he was raised in the Hashira Mansion, and this is just an example, and this, what if he was not raised in the Hashira Mansion, but all of that is what matters. Situation, especially in Demon Slayer. So that would lead to an easier Infinity Castle and an easier Sunrise Countdown arc, just because of his situation. That is a big thing in Demon Slayer, and I truly believe that. because if Tanjiro was trained by Giyu instead of Urokodaki, I don't think Giyu would be the reason why he's so much stronger. It would just flat out be the situation he was put in. Now, I would love to hear what you guys have to say or your opinions in the comment section below. Shoot, maybe you think him going with Giyu would make him weaker. Maybe you have an actual reason for that. I would love to hear it in the comment section below. Or maybe you think, wow, you actually underpowered him or overpowered him in this regard because he would be able to do this and do that. I would love to hear what you guys think, like I said, in the comment section. And as always, if you enjoyed, show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.